Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today, I have a really special episode for you. I know I say that about every single episode, but it's true in my heart. Today, we have some of the members of my Peaceful Parenting membership, and we are having a little panel discussion about parenting our extra or more challenging kids and the things that have been hard and the things that have been really helpful for these parents that have joined us today. And just a little note on that, today, when you are listening to this podcast, that is Wednesday, April 12th is the day that this comes out. The doors to the membership are going to be open for 1 week, and I only open the doors twice a year so that we can really just focus on supporting the members inside the membership. So if you are listening during this time period and you're interested in the membership, go to sararosensweet.com/membership. If you are listening to this after the doors are closed, you can get on a wait list to join the next time we open, but there's tons of information about the membership. You'll hear some of us referring to it. So that's it. If you're interested, you can join today for the next week and just go to sararosensweet.com/membership. And now we're going to dive in and meet my lovely members. We have been laughing for 10 minutes before we started recording, and it's just nice to have these wonderful faces looking at me. We actually are seeing each other on video, and you are only going to be hearing us, but I'm so happy to introduce you to these people who I feel like I know them. And so maybe you could each just say your name and how old your kids are, and then we'll dive into our topic for today. I'll start with you, Kalia.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kalia, and I have 2 daughters, an 8-year-old and a 3.5-year-old.
I'm Amy. I have 11-year-old daughter and almost 10-year-old son.
All right. And I've known you for a really long time, so they used to be a lot littler. You've been in the membership since it started.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elise, and I have 3 boys, a 15-year-old boy, an 11-year-old boy, and a 7-year-old boy.
Okay, and Corey.
Well, listeners to the podcast should know me. I'm Corey. I'm one of Sarah's parenting coaches, and I have 2 boys, one that's 4.5 and one that's 7.5.
All right, and Corey's here doing double duty today as a fellow parent and also as one of the coaches who works with me. And Jessica, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I have 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the call today. So I mentioned that what we were going to be talking about is parenting when our kids are those, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while or in the membership, you know I talk about the 20% of kids and the 80% of the kids, and those 20% of kids who are just, whether it's because they are really strong-willed or they're neurodivergent or they're sensitive or they have some anxiety or any combination of those things, and they're just more intense than those 80% of kids. And those are numbers I made up. I'll be totally honest, just based on my anecdotal experience. But, I always tell people, I sometimes meet somebody at, a cocktail party or something. And when I tell them I'm a parenting coach, they look at me like I have 2 heads, like they couldn't possibly understand why anyone would ever need a parenting coach. And I automatically know, oh, they've got those kids that are in the 80%, right? Those kids that you can say, go and put your shoes on, it's time to go. And then their kids just standing by the door with their shoes and their coat on, ready to go, right? Those are not our people. I mean, I love those people, but those are not our people. Our people are the kids in the 20% who are those, as I said, those extra kids or those challenging kids, those more kids. So why don't we just dive in? And I think the 2 things that I had in mind to talk about, and maybe we could start with those. And then I'm interested in what you feel that parents have to know about this, because my goal for this is that those people out there who don't know anybody else or don't think they know anybody else who have that, I guess that's the key, that they don't think they know anyone else who has those kids who are more challenging. I want those listeners to feel like they're not alone and that there are people out there who get it, who are walking this path like right alongside with them, and the struggle and the challenges. And I also want to say right off the bat that we're not here to like throw the kids under the bus, like literally or figuratively, but that I know that you all, even if you are going to quote complain about your kids and how hard they are, I know how much you love them. And I just want to get that like off the, right off the bat, where everyone loves their kids. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about if you love them or you think that they can be wonderful a lot of the times. We're just talking about the hard stuff today. So the two things that stand out to me about having these kinds of kids is that there is a grieving process that happens when you realize this isn't what you thought it was going to be like. We all had this image in our heads of what parenthood was going to be before we had kids. And often the struggle and the stress is not what we had pictured. So I guess let's start with that. Let's talk about that. Who has something to say about that? Maybe I'll say, when did you first sort of realize that this was going to be not what you exactly thought it was going to be?
I would say I figured that out early, like in the first couple months. I had the baby that needed to be on me all the time. But okay, I guess baby sleeps on me and I am always attached to the baby. And I realized at some point in there, I needed to grieve the loss of who I used to be because I was now needing to be a different person. And if I didn't let go of what used to be me, I wasn't going to continue, or it was going to be a struggle. I was fighting it all the time. And once I figured out, oh, say goodbye to that old self, that started helping me. And then I remember going through it again when she was like 9 or 10 months, and it like all came in my old life. I was dreaming about it, and I was seeing people from my old life in my dreams, and like it was intense. And I realized, oh, I'm saying goodbye to that old life. And so I go through it repeatedly. I'm in it again right now. So this was really timely for me, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I don't want to talk too long, but
No, what's going on for you right now?
well, so I figured out this time, now that I'm in therapy, I have help with someone figuring out. I'm like, I have to grieve that I don't have the kids I thought I'd have. I don't have the life that I thought I would have as a mother that I wanted for so long, and now it sucks. But she, with her, I figured out this time I'm grieving the loss of control. So then I started looking back. I'm like, oh, I grieved the loss of freedom at one point. I grieved the loss of my extroverted meeting new people all the time self. So I go through different things. This time it's control. Like I don't have control of what happens in my house. And when that's my new mantra, I have no control. I have no control. Okay. I just have to figure out how to work with this instead of trying to control my child, because that doesn't work at all. So that's my thing that I'm trying to focus on right now, is figuring out each time what it is that has come up to grieve this time. And once I pinpoint it, it's helping let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Kalia, I totally understand that. I think you learned so much as a parent of these kids about yourself, like learning about what my son struggles with or my daughter struggles with. I start to see, like you said, that about control. And I came to parenting older. And so I had my life set up. I was able to avoid the pitfalls. I was able to navigate life in a way that was comfortable and easy and flowed. And then I had kids and they did not do what I expected. and my expectation of how I would parent them was so much different because how I had been raised was traditional, right? Like what most of us grew up with, where there was consequences, there were punishments, it wasn't terribly out of the ordinary. It was just, you had a certain level of fear with your parents that you were going to get in trouble if you did something that wasn't what was in the rule book or whatever. And you come to that with these kids, and then you realize that it doesn't matter the punishment. They're not what you expected, and your life is no longer under your control.
Well, what I find with a lot of people who are more extra kids is that they fully intended to do sort of traditional parenting,
Yeah.
traditional conventional parenting,
Yeah.
but that it does not
It
work
does not
with those
work.
kids,
No,
and
it
that
escalates.
they first they try to double down and like, okay, make the consequences worse or whatever, and that it just completely like everything just spirals out of control, and they start to think, okay, I've got to do something different, and then end up coming to peaceful parenting.
I think for me, I didn't really realize how extra my daughter was. She's 6 until my son was born. And I purposely, waited till I was older to have children. I wanted to, be established, have a good career, and, be self-sufficient and be able to afford all of those things to my children that I necessarily wasn't able to get. And so I waited a significant amount of time in between my kids because, I was trying to do everything exactly. The doctor said, wait 2 years till your body's healed. The doctor said, do this. So I was like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And they said to breastfeed and they said to do this. So I did everything to a T. And so I didn't find it to be more challenging, I think, parenting until my son was born. I mean, it was difficult because, I wanted her to wear all the cutesy clothes and to, be the poster child for, being cute and all that. And she didn't like it. She didn't want it. She's a shorts and t-shirt kind of girl. And, like Amy and Khalil were saying, I had to give up that control. And now I'm just wear what you want. She wears Christmas in the summer. And I'm just like, okay, let's go. Like, that's what we're wearing today. Okay. And I think it was more, not so much that the punishments and consequences weren't working, it's that they didn't feel good to me. And I just felt, I was like, this isn't right. Something about this isn't right. And a friend would say, you just need to beat them. You just need to give them a good whooping and they'll listen and things will be fine. And this is me being completely honest and vulnerable. And I did. And I felt awful. And I said, this isn't right. This is not right. This is not how it's supposed to be. This doesn't feel good to me. And I don't think this is how it's supposed to be. And that's when I started everything. And that's when, I found peaceful parenting and it changed my kids' lives, the relationship with my kids, and it changed me because I'm learning and healing myself through my children and raising them. So
That is so, I think that is the path that a lot of people who take up this challenge find, right? When they have, like, you can either blame your kids, which I do see a lot. People are just say like they're, just bad kids or whatever, or they can look at themselves. And not everybody takes up that challenge to look at themselves and do that healing. But I just want to go back to something that you said, Jessica, which was that you didn't realize how extra your daughter was until you had your son. Because I think that's also pretty common too. Like I saw everyone nodding along when you said that, because I think sometimes we just don't realize that, wow, this kid is actually harder than the average kid until we have an easy one, and some people find it in the reverse order, and they have an easy first child and they're patting themselves on the back for what wonderful parents they are. And then they have the next child and they're like, oh my gosh, it wasn't us. It was the kid was so easy. So anyone else want to add into that piece, like maybe, how you realized or what you've been learning about your more extra kid?
For me, it took me a long, long time. Like it took me 9 years to realize that my son, he was the one with whom I had the most adversarial relationship, but he was getting along well with his father. So I was happy to leave him to his father. And I had the older one with whom I get along really well. And the baby, the baby all to me, and that was fine. And then the pandemic hit, and it was hard on everyone, and he was all the time with me. And one day, we found ourselves in Gatineau Park in Ottawa, and it's a big, 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 big park with wolves and bears. And he ran away. He ran away, and for 45 minutes, I was looking for him, and I had what was then my 4-year-old with me and a friend of my middle son with us who didn't know me, didn't know my 4-year-old. It was the first time we were together. I just had taken him with us to the park, and I had to leave my 4-year-old with that new boy while I was looking for my then 9-year-old. And it was it was the day when I came home and I told my husband, I cannot do this myself. This is too much. Like, it is beyond what I know to do.
That's so hard.
And yeah, and like other things happened that summer. Like one time he didn't want to get out of the pool, and I was again with a 4-year-old, and by the time I put the 4-year-old in the changing rooms and I went back to get my 9-year-old, I put him, I took him out of the water by himself. Yeah. And then I went back to the change room. I came back to get my 9-year-old, and he was in immense change rooms and he wouldn't get out. So my 4-year-old was alone in the change rooms, in the pool, and I couldn't reach my 9-year-old.
There's so
And yeah,
much that goes along with that, isn't there? Like there's the fear that your kids are not okay. There's the frustration that they're putting you
oh
through
my
this.
God. Yeah, like
There's the embarrassment that all these other parents are watching you and have their own opinions. Not that you're particularly worried about that at that moment, but you don't really feel like anybody understands what the heck you're going through at that moment.
yeah,
Like,
like it's
yeah.
really like asking 20-year-olds to check.
Yeah. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
Get your 9-year-old out
right.
of the men's rooms. It feels weird, and of anger, like
Yep.
so much anger towards my 9-year-old to put me in a position where I had to put my 4-year-old in danger, basically.
And then you have to then take a step back once you're not triggered yourself and in your own fight, flight, or freeze situation and say he was having a hard time, not giving you a hard time. And
I
how
think
can
both of those
you
times, yeah,
manage?
both of those times, it was so big that I realized that like I didn't get like I could feel the anger, but I didn't get angry at him. Probably could feel it seething from me, but I didn't yell. I didn't say. I just said, you can't put us in, like, you can't put me in the position of putting your 4-year-old brother in danger. This is not acceptable." And that's all I said. There was, because
And he probably knew,
what
he
can you
knew that you
say?
were mad, which is probably why he locked himself in the dressing room in the first place, because he knew you were, he knew that he was not making good choices, but their brains just can't always help them.
Well, now I understand way more why he would have acted this way, but I just wanted to say it can take a long time. You can have an adversarial relationship and and then suddenly, yeah. I think at the same, like a few months earlier, I had a nervous breakdown, like a mental breakdown, because I realized some things about my childhood and about who I was as a child. And I got hurt when I was 13, and then my oldest son was 13. And then I realized how much of a child I was. So I started therapy, and my therapist was very effective. And within a few months, we already started working on compassion. Very like I went down that rabbit hole of compassion and self compassion very quickly and effectively. And also, I think what happened is that our relationship was bad, but he wasn't at home all the time. And then the pandemic hit, and our relationship actually got better because school was hard for him. And so he was like, when he was coming back from school, it was always like, it was mayhem. It was hard. Like, he would lie down on the floor when I was picking him up and be like, I want to go. I can't get up. And I would just be like, you come just now. And not yelling because, of course, I'm at school. And so I'm not doing it in front of the other parents. But, like giving that direction to him. Like, I come from a very authoritarian kind of parenting, and that was what I was applying. And then, yeah, the pandemic hit. The first month were great because basically our relationship healed. But I think seeing me so distressed activated his anxiety even more. And then the loss of control of the pandemic even heightened his anxiety even more. And so his anxiety became so much bigger. Then I finally realized that it wasn't that he was a bad kid, it was that he was suffering. Yeah. And I had the help of my therapist, and I started like she's very big on mindfulness, and so like the mindfulness practices helped me be conscious of the fact that he was he was really having a hard time. So that's what, I guess it's a combination of factors, like he shooting right up and me finally having some tools to see.
That makes sense. So, in terms of the grief piece, does anyone have anything else that they wanted to say about that? Because I know that comes up again and again for us in our community, in our membership community, just about having to, I think, forgive yourself almost for having those feelings. Like, so there's a self compassion piece as well, and the grief piece. But does anyone else have anything they want to add about their journey around that piece?
I like what I was thinking about it. I was I remember that day when he ran out in the park, and I remember the despair that I felt, like how completely useless and completely at a loss, and it reminded me of just after having my first newborn, and like I went through postpartum, and like I felt as helpless and as like helpless as I felt after having my newborn, and I think and then I remember having my second son, and just once just after he was born, I had that thought. I remember I was in a grocery store and I had that thought, why did I do that to myself again? And then after my third son, I was fine. And I'm cycling through all of this. Like I feel like the despair thing and the grief, I'm cycling through this like this I thought that talking about the helpless feeling that you feel after having a newborn could be relatable for a lot of parents, because I think we've all felt it. And so that's what I cycle through. And now I'm in a cycle where I feel actually grateful to my son, because without him I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have taken that path, and he's helping me become the person I'm meant to be.
They are our gurus.
Yeah.
They help us learn so much.
One thing in that cycle of despair and helpless, one of the big aspects for me is failure. I feel like a failure. Like, why can't my kid get out of the pool when it's time to get out of the pool? Why can't how can I not manage to? I have two hands, I can hold them each by their hand, and I still can't get them to where I need them to go. Like, even going to a grocery store. How can I not just get the 5 things on the list? And it's an hour and a half, and I have to get down in their face and do the threaten thing or and then, oh yeah, and I'm failing. Like, and then I try to come back to okay, what are the tools I know from peaceful parenting? Or I need to go make a post in the membership group so that I remember I am not alone. This is not me. This is everyone has a hard time with these kids sometimes. And I got stuck in the cycle again, and now I have to climb my way back out. And I am not a horrible person. I'm not a worthless person. So, yes, the self compassion piece is really important for me, because I go to this must be hard because I'm failing at it.
Yes.
And
That is
that,
so common. Like,
yeah.
if I were doing a better job, I wouldn't be struggling. And that's what all of the 20% parents struggle with, is feeling like it's their fault that, if I were only doing this right, or this differently, then my kid would be easy. And it's just not it's just not the case.
And I love peaceful parenting, but there's also a trap in there. When you're reading it, you're like, well, if I could just do that, my kids would cooperate with me. If I could just say it in that way, it would work. And then groups like the membership group, and even your group, Sarah, the big Facebook group, is more real than some of the others. I've left all the others because they just made me feel worse. And peaceful parenting in reality, doesn't mean that you're a peaceful parent all the time, to me. Like, I don't say the right thing all the time. I do still yell, but I also have learned that I repair, and my kids know that I love them even when I mess up. And I try and claim those things as mine. And then I get to come to you and say, oh my gosh, this is hard. And everyone else says, yes, it is. And I feel like, oh, okay. Because those real life friends that you have that have the 80% kids, they don't help you feel better about yourself.
No, there was a funny thing. I think actually you might have one of you commented on it. What is like a collection of tweets that and one of them said, if one other person tells me, "Have you tried putting him down drowsy but awake?" I'm gonna chop someone's
Flip
head
my
off.
lid.
But like all of the, have you tried the blah blah blah? Like
Yes, I have tried. Trust me, I have tried.
Well, and I think Jessica, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I've seen you on a really wonderful self-compassion journey from when you first came to the group, and you're on a learning curve of peaceful parenting, and you would really beat yourself up about times when you like yelled at your daughter or slipped. And how has that been for you? That I think you're getting a lot more compassionate with yourself is my point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In the beginning, I can remember, going a whole week just beating myself up of why did I do that? Why did I do that? That was awful. You're such a bad mom. You shouldn't have done that. And you ruined your relationship. You ruined your child. And I think I'm down to like, I'm good till the end of the day. So it's significantly better. It's still hard, but I think it reminds me when I'm in that moment, when I'm triggered, like I just lose all thought and I'm like, I don't remember to be a peaceful parent, but I have to consciously bring myself back there. And it just helps. It helps me to remember when my kids are having a hard time. It's like, okay, she's struggling or he's struggling because the same that as when I struggle, when I'm triggered and she just doesn't know what to do and doesn't know how to act. So it helps me to remind myself of that when I'm triggered and when my child is triggered to do that. But I always go back and repair after or apologize, or sometimes she even reminds me and I'm like, you know what, you're right. Sometimes there's been a couple of times where she's come to me first and she apologizes to me, and sometimes I'm just not ready to, but I still go and apologize because she made that effort at 6 years old, and I'm like, well, if a 6 year old can make that effort, surely a 38-year old can do that. So you need to get yourself together and apologize to your child and make this right. Yeah, I definitely always apologize and go back, and I definitely see it working. And I think I posted it in the wins where like I see the compassion in her with her brother, and that is just my reminder that okay, this is working. And it's hard to listen to other parents, just like Clea said, oh, try this or do this, or all this stuff works, and I'm like, okay, it might work with your child, but my child is much different. She has a mind of her own, and she just likes to do her thing, and 95% of the time I let her, and that's okay. But yeah, the self-compassion is really difficult, and I need reminders constantly. And that's typically when I go to the group and I post something and I get feedback from everybody saying have compassion. Mostly Elise comes and it's like, have compassion for yourself. That's the first thing, and I'm like, you're right, okay. And then I'm usually good. But yeah.
Well, and I think when we do have these kids that are more extra kids, I mean, everyone needs to have and I don't mean to suggest that people who are have the 80% kids never struggle or never feel like they're failures. I think it's just a matter of degrees, right? Like I think it's just a matter of degrees and intensity. But I think that that self-compassion piece is extra important when you have hard kids, because they're going to trigger you and they're going to challenge you and they're not going to listen to you. And as Kalia was saying, there's sometimes people give the impression that if you are practicing peaceful parenting, then your kids are going to listen to you and cooperate all the time. And you sort of sometimes can come away from that thinking, well, I must be doing something wrong if I'm still struggling. Well, guess what? You can do everything, quote, right, and you can still struggle. Like you can be relatively consistent and, practicing all of the tools and still have a hard time. And that's just the reality of it. It doesn't mean that you're not doing it right. And that, I think sometimes the pressure that parents put on themselves even makes it harder to be a peaceful parent, because then you feel like you messed
Absolutely.
up and then you're more reactive.
And we get the opportunity to practice, right? Like Our kids give us so much opportunity. And at the same time, we get to model for them messing up and making that
Yeah.
repair. And you know what? Mommy has a hard time with her emotions, her big emotions, just like you do. And this is hard for everybody. And you're learning so much at, your ages. I didn't even start this journey until my kids were 4 and 6. And I didn't know I had extra kids. I just thought I was not doing it right. I was like, I clearly don't. And my mom's like, you don't have the look. You don't have the look that you need to give your kids that they'll do what you tell them to. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about because
No,
it's
they don't
not
respond to
working.
the look.
Whatever I'm doing is not working. So I found peaceful parenting. Thank goodness that I was able to find this path. I've looked at a lot of different options. There's been a lot of different parenting options, and this path is so powerful with these kids because of the self introspection and the self evaluation that we do, that we get to look at what we contribute to the situation as much as our kids contribute to the situation. And then there's the guilt, talking about guilt and shame and all that good stuff. I spent 6 years of my daughter's life and 4 years of my son's life not practicing this and not knowing these tools. And they're most impacted, the brains are most impacted by the 2 or 3, and I'm like, oh, super, so I missed that window.
Oh, you know what? No,
but it's not
I'm sure
true. It's not.
Listen, I'm sure that's true to a certain degree, but I think that's an overblown thing that our brains are always changing.
Yes.
No
Otherwise, we
even as
wouldn't be
adults.
able to
Yeah.
change things and
It's
make
never too
different
late. It's never too
paths.
late.
So yes,
Sometimes it might take longer.
Right.
Your kids are older, but it's never too late to make changes.
Can I
Yeah,
ask
go.
Amy to bring something up? You mentioned in the email before we did this, our extra kids show us how much extra we are, even if we didn't know it before.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
that's
God, yeah.
so true.
Yeah. I have 2 very differently wired kids, and I see so much of myself in both of them, and so much of how I've masked in my life in order to manage through life in the way that I grew up, and also understanding that I made my life comfortable, that I didn't have to, that I navigated around things that were hard. And now I don't have a choice but to go through them, and I have to figure out how to do it as a mom, to show other people how to do it. So it's awesome at the same time, because I'm like, oh, that explains so much about what I've gone through. And this is how I can deal with it better than I have in my life. So it's as much a gift as it is hard.
I remember listening to one of Lynn Lyons' podcasts about anxiety, but it was about anxiety in your marriage. And I almost skipped it. And then I was like, oh, maybe. And then I listened to it, and I had been listening to those podcasts for maybe 6 months to help with my son's anxiety. And I listened to it, and I was like, oh my God, I have anxiety too. And then right after, I went to see a friend, and I said, okay, so I just realized I have anxiety. And she looked at me and was like, yeah, I've known since I've met you. And same thing, I'm looking into ADHD and everything, and same friend. I was like, I think the more I talk about the way my brain works, the more I think that I have ADHD. And she was like, yeah. And then my best friend, who's also just been diagnosed, maybe 6 months, I tell her, and she's like, yeah, I wasn't telling you yet. And it's so, for me, the diagnosis, I'm not even diagnosed properly, but it's, and for my children, the way I see it is, it's a tool. It's a tool to understand. It's a tool to, it's I was going to say reading my material. I have more like, okay, so I've got this. It's a way to understand. It's not something that defines me, but it's it explains a lot about me and how I relate to my children and how my children relate to me and how we relate to the world, and just promotes, again, self-compassion and self-acceptance.
And knowledge is powerful. I mean, when
Yeah.
you don't understand why someone is acting the way they act, it can be really perplexing, and you can have low compassion for that person, right? Or even for yourself. Like, why is it so hard for me to stay calm? Or why is it so hard for me to blah, blah, blah? Corey, you've been very quiet, but I want you to share what you told me this morning that you wanted to share about what you've been thinking about grief and our more extra kids.
This might be the first time in my life anyone's ever said, Corey, you're being quiet. So I wanted to go back to what Amy said about how our children are more, and that also means that we learn that we are also more. And that has been where a lot of my grief is coming for, is not only do I have grief for my child because I see how hard life is for him being an extra kid, but I have so much grief for myself because through him, I've learned, all these challenges I didn't even realize I had. So I just feel really sad for that little girl. So I think that's been a ton of my grief work, has been around that. And I said to Sarah, the interesting way that I've been dealing with this grief is in the same way, let's talk about Lynn Lyons again, in the same way that she talks about the worry brain, where you have to, when anxiety shows up, you just have to be like, hey, there's my worry brain, and talk back to it. That's how I deal with grief. So when it shows up, I just kind of look at it gently and I'm like, there's that grief again. And instead of how we talk back to the worry brain and tell it to get out of here, instead with the grief is I, turn towards it with a real gentle way and try and let myself sit with it and feel that. And then I'm able to move through it. And just like Kalia said earlier, it comes up over and over again. And every time it shows up, it's just once again, there you are. I see you and I accept you and I'm going to sit with you. So that's been a big part of how I see grief and how I'm working through my grief journey. And then, of course, I have to go the academic route, which Sarah's used to with me. And we both attended a training by Dr. Gordon Newfield. And he did this idea on the traffic model of frustration. And he basically, we can put it in the show notes because it's now available on YouTube. And he talked about how when you're feeling frustrated, which I think is what a lot of us feel a lot of the time with our more and extra kids, that's your brain doing its job. It's telling you that something is not working. And you have to kind of enter that roundabout. And the first exit that you can make is to change. And that's where we all go, right? Like, I'm just going to change what I'm doing and I'll find the right thing. And if I do that thing, it's all going to be easier. But often that doesn't work with our extra kids. It can help. That's what our peaceful parenting tools are for. They can make a lot of progress and create a beautiful relationship. But it's the next stop on the roundabout, which is you have to adapt. And in order to adapt, you have to accept what you cannot change. And I think that's what a lot of us have to do with these beautiful, differently wired and more and extra kids, is really just accept them and feel that pain that we have about that. And that allows us to kind of move on. But if we don't do that, it's the next part of the roundabout where you move up into like aggression and more frustration. And I found that such a useful model and tool for us to use and to visualize when you're working with these more and extra kids, because we can get stuck in just trying to change or, getting more and more frustrated instead of going into that spot of acceptance.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Sorry. I was going to say I'm going to cry. I feel very emotional right now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hardest thing to do too, right? To adapt. And I think that's what you've all been talking about, the invitation that your more extra kids have given you to do your own healing and your own work on yourself. And that's a big part of that adaptation. But
Corey,
what I was going to say,
can you go through all those in the same experience? Like, where you're like, I don't want this to be happening. I like you could like
Just keep
Like you're
going
like at
around and
the
I
around the
know,
roundabout.
I know.
Round and around and
Like,
around.
I hate that this is happening. I don't like this situation, but I can handle it. I can do this. I can do hard things, and we're going to get through this. It's just hard right now, and we can do this. So,
Well, I mean, that's the self-compassion piece, right? Sometimes parents will say like, will kind of get mad at themselves for feeling like sorry for themselves. But I think I think you have to kind of put aside some time to just really feel like it's not fair, right? Like it's not fair. Like it's not fair that I have these extra challenges that other people, my sister doesn't have or my neighbors or whatever. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to rise to the occasion of the adaptation and the work, but it isn't fair, right? Like it's not fair. And I think
And if
giving
you ignore that part, I don't feel like you can move forward.
yeah, you're 100% right.
you get
Like
stuck for
I
sure.
we always talk about that without self-compassion, you can't do this work. You literally can't do the work without forgiving yourself and giving yourself love. And anyone who thinks they can do better by beating themselves up, talk to Jessica here, right? Like you've learned that. I know everyone here has. Sorry, I don't mean to single you out, Jessica, but like beating yourself up about either that your kids aren't, quote, acting like they should act or that you messed up, like nobody is ever going to get sort of the life that they want or do the work they want to do without self-compassion.
I always remind myself now that I'm in it that it's frustrating that it took me so long to learn this, but without my child, I would have never known to go on this journey to heal myself. That I'm doing it for her, but also it's helped me myself to identify all the things that I need to work on for myself because like I've heard time and time again, it's not the kids, it's not my kids, it's me and it's how I'm handling the situation. They're just being kids, like they don't know any better. They want to play. And like, come on, we gotta go. Like, what? They don't want to go to the post office. They don't want to go grocery shopping. They want to stay at the playground. So they're just being a kid. And if I was doing something fun and they were telling me to leave, I'd be like, well, I don't want to go, but I'm an adult and I can stay and I can I can make that choice. But as a child, they don't have that choice. So I just remind myself that, yeah, it sucks that it took so long, but it's it's better now because I can, heal myself as well and, do it better. And I remind myself that I'm a cycle breaker, that I am breaking the cycle and that I am, making this world a better place two by two children, at the very least, by two children, sometimes three when my stepson is here. But, and that's what I keep telling myself is I'm breaking the cycle and hopefully it doesn't go past me and my children will not have to go through this. I had to go through it, but I'm doing everything in my power so that my children don't have to.
Well, I've worked on that in therapy because then when I fall back, I'm like, but I don't want them to have to. And she's like, stop. We just have to make progress. Like, they're always going to have stuff they have to work on in therapy, no matter what you do. So take that off your plate right now.
You're not the only
And,
influence in their lives, Kalia.
right. Oh, but I'm funny. But as long as we're making progress, like I remember coming back from Christmas and my grandma just moved, and so Christmas was in a different house. And it made all the aunts and uncles and grandma and like the whole dynamic changed. And you saw so much more of that family dynamic. And I came back and went, wow, I'm screwing up plenty, but I'm not doing that stuff. So, so we've already made progress. Like, my kids are not going to have this or this or this. So, as long as we can keep taking steps up the stairs of progress, every generation gets better and gets less of that. Hopefully, I mean, I like to think that the baggage isn't quite as sharp or
Heavy.
yeah, like they're still going to have baggage, but maybe it's not as gut wrenching. Maybe it's just, I don't know.
Or we're giving them tools. We're giving them tools to help.
And we're giving them those
manage and move
baggage. Yeah.
forward. Yeah, like we're
Yeah,
doing
they've got the
both.
toolbox
Right.
along with that
Like, I'm going to
baggage.
knock a hole in the wall and here's your toolbox
Yes.
to fix
Yes.
it.
They've got wheels. I was just thinking, I just came back from a trip with my dad and like walking through the airport with the wheeled luggage. And I remembered when I was a kid, luggage didn't have wheels. So now, Kalia, your children's baggage has
Has
wheels. It's a little
wheels.
easier to
Yes.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
they have
I love that
they're pulling
metaphor.
it
That's
they're
fantastic.
pulling it with wheels and their purse is a tool bag.
That's
I
right.
like that.
That's right.
We need an illustrator to like
Yeah.
put this in like a comic strip or something. Anyone out there
Someone in our
listening
group.
anyone out there listening who's an illustrator or a comic artist, you can feel free to
Oh my
make
God, that's
something for us.
fantastic.
We want to see it.
Yeah. And I know all of you have had this experience, but Jessica, I'm just going to highlight what she said again about seeing this with her children, how her 6-year-old talks to her 2-year-old when her 2-year-old's having a hard time. Already like they're showing that they have tools that we didn't have when we were growing up.
Yeah, my 10-year-old came running in the other day. He heard my voice getting louder in the kitchen as I was getting frustrated and escalated by my daughter because it was dinner time and we were all hungry and I was trying to get food made and she was asking me 1,000 questions. And he came running in from the playroom and he grabbed me around the middle and he's like, "You're missing something, Mom. You're missing something." And he gave me a big hug. And I was like, you know what? You were right. I was. And thank you for that reminder that my voice was getting too loud. And he knew he was hearing it happen. And he just redirected me. And he was able to make that. And he's my hard one.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And I think everyone does. I think there's age and brain development on your side too, right? As people are getting older, it gets a little bit easier and their brains get, and as Jessica was saying, she gets to decide that the post office is important and can pull herself away from what she's doing to go to the post office because she has perspective on life. Like, you can't just stay at the park all day. You also have to go to the post office. And our kids don't have that yet, right? They don't have that
Right.
perspective on making those choices. Well, I think it's about time to start wrapping up. And I'm just wondering if any of you have something that you wanted to add to those parents out there who maybe didn't know that they were not the only one who was struggling or who felt like a failure sometimes because they're doing all the things and they were still having a hard time. Anything that we didn't talk about or that you wanted to highlight before we sign off.
I would say if you're trying to do all the things and it's still hard for you to do it the way you're trying to do it, that's okay too. Like, I used to be great at peaceful parenting. I was bottling up a whole lot of stuff inside me, but I was great with my baby. Then I had a second baby, and I am still struggling to get back to the voice my peaceful, kind, loving voice making requests. And I can't find that voice as often as I want to find that voice. And I find the yelling voice more often than I want to find the yelling voice. And I can't quit because of everything we've talked about today. And because knowing that peaceful parenting is what we need and what our kids need. So even when it's not going as well within you as you want it to be, that doesn't mean you can't do this.
Mm-hmm. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every
Wasn't that
day.
my win last week? We do
Yeah.
wins. Sarah has Wednesday wins. Share a win. And I think mine was I'm still here.
Yes. Which is a completely wonderful and valid win, 100%. And there are good days and bad days, and some days when you feel like you're killing it, and some days when you feel like a failure. And I think just on those days, we just have to come back to self compassion. We'll put in the show notes a self compassion break based on the work of Kristen Neff that I put together, because I think it's like those moments where you have to just stop and do the self compassion break, or use my favorite phrase, which is, even though I yelled at my kids 10 times today and grabbed someone's arm a little too hard, I'm still worthy and lovable.
And I don't remember if it was you, Sarah, that said, it was like Ned Hallowell or somebody said that when you only have 40% to give on any given day and you show up at 40%, you've given 100% for that day. And so take that into consideration too. Like, you can only do what you can do in any given day. And you cannot control all those circumstances that happen in any given day. So try to give yourself that
And you know,
break.
we don't even know, like, we're so hard on ourselves. I remember this story. I forget who told me this story, but somebody, maybe it was in a Facebook group, somebody said that she and her sister were reminiscing about their childhood with their mother, and they were talking about one of their favorite childhood memories was when they got to have this dinner of what they called small things in front of the TV. This was like a highlight of their childhood, getting to have the small things dinner in front of the TV. And it was like cheese and crackers and baby carrots and, you know, whatever little stuff on a plate. And their mother said, "You're kidding me. Those were the days that I just couldn't manage to get a dinner together and I couldn't manage to deal with you. So I just put you in front of the TV with whatever I could find in the fridge." So for her, it was like this memory of her like low points as a parent. But for the kids, they were like, "Yay, small things dinner in front of the TV." So just, you know, we see ourselves through this really harsh lens, and it's not, you know, I'm not saying that our kids don't notice it sometimes if we're not being kind, but it's often not as bad as we think it is.
My little reminder is always, at the end of the day, my kids still want me over anybody else, no matter how the day went. And that just reminds me that, okay, today wasn't the greatest. We'll try again tomorrow. And they still love me and they still want me now. And that's my motivation to keep doing what I'm doing and to do better the next day.
Yeah. For me, I have 3 mantras. I think one comes from you, Sarah. It's I did this and I'm still worthy and lovable. And like it comes also from my therapist is always with both and. So something happened and like not but and and yeah, this happened and I'm still worthy and lovable and a good mom. And then another mantra is it's not I'm not trying to do my best anymore. I'm trying to do as well as I can under the circumstances. Like because my best is just unattainable. Like and it's something that yeah, anyway. And shoot, I don't remember the third one.
If you think of it before we hang up, tell us. But
Yeah.
does
Okay.
anyone else have anything they wanted to add for those folks out there listening?
Just that you're important too.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about our kids all the time, and I love my kids, and they're amazing, and they're important, and all of their needs are so valid. And, like Elise was just saying, and I am important too.
Mm-hmm.
The parents are important too.
Well, we can't meet their, I mean, it's that silly old thing of putting on your own oxygen mask first, right? Like you can't meet your kids' needs from a place of depletion. And sometimes that's the only way I can get clients to take their care of themselves is if they think they're doing it for their kids. Don't eat the crumbs off your kid, you know, don't eat the crusts off from your kid's sandwich for lunch. Like, you know, all of the effort that parents put into making their children nice food, like make yourself nice food. Make sure you get a time outside and moving your body and all of the things you think about. Enough sleep. Like we spend so much time and energy trying to make sure our kids get enough sleep, you know?
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh, I remember the third mantra.
Okay.
And that comes from one of my closest friends. It's, oh, well.
Oh, I
This
love that.
happened.
Oh,
Oh, well.
Well, that is so
It's
great.
so good.
Yeah,
I
that is
like
so
it.
good.
When I can feel my frustration, I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to go back to cutting my carrots.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Well, thank you all so much. Did anyone want to add anything that didn't get to? I've lost track.
So the one thing I was going to say is a homework assignment for people who have more or extra kids is to ask them to pretend to be you and to put on a show for you. And the things you're going to see are going to warm your heart and remind you of how your kid sees you. We always see all the things we're not doing, but I've been doing this with my kids lately and it's become their favorite thing to do. And every time they're mostly doing the things that are our peaceful parenting tools, right? And it's such a fun game for them. So on a lighter note, it's just my homework assignment to you to play with them and to let them be you so that you can see yourself with more love like they do.
Aw, I love that. All right, everyone who tries it, come join our Facebook group. It's called Peaceful Parenting with Sarah Rosensweet, or join us in the membership, which would be amazing. But either way, let us know how the homework assignment went and what you thought of this episode. I'm so grateful to the 5 of you for coming on and being vulnerable and sharing this. And I know it's going to help so many parents. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.